Hello, everyone. Welcome to another sociology lecture. I am Dr. Dilsora Fozilova. I'm very happy to be with you today again. This week, we are going to talk about contemporary risks with a focus on critiquing modernity. Ulrich Beck's Risk Society Towards a New Modernity is one of those books that critiques our modern times. Ulrich Beck's Risk Society is a seminal work that fundamentally redefines our understanding of modernity in the context of pervasive risks that characterize contemporary life. Beck introduced the concept of risk society to describe a new phase in the evolution of modern society, where the focus shifts from distribution of wealth to distribution of risks. These risks, often global in nature, stem from technological advancements, environmental degradation, and various forms of societal and industrial change. Unlike the tangible threats of earlier eras, these modern risks are more abstract, unescapable, and often invisible, leading to widespread uncertainty and anxiety in our societies. In this lecture on the Risk Society, we will explore how the dynamics of risk have transformed social, political, and economic structures. Beck argues that traditional institutions and frameworks, which were designed to manage wealth and inequality, are increasingly ill-equipped to address the complex, interconnected risks of modern world. This transformation has profound implications for governance, as the boundaries between local, global, public, and private becoming blurred more and more. The management of risks becomes a central political issue, influencing policy decisions and shaping the everyday lives of individuals and communities. Furthermore, Beck delves into the sociological implications of living in a risk society, emphasizing how risk impacts identity, social cohesion, and trust to institutions, trust to our social institutions. He discusses the process of reflexive modernization, where society becomes increasingly aware of the risks it produces and attempts to manage them, often with mixed results. This awareness leads to critical re-evaluation of progress and scientific authority, challenging the notion of technological and industrial advancements clearly lead to societal improvement. Beck's analysis provides a critical framework for understanding the paradoxes of our modernity or modern times, highlighting the need for new approaches to manage and mitigate the risks that define our contemporary world. With a short introduction, let's get to our PowerPoint slides and explore Beck's work more analytically. So Ulrich Beck's book called Risk Society Towards New Modernity. Towards a new modernity. So today, what we're going to do today, I'll just turn off this video. So today we are going to discuss Ulrich Beck's concept of risk society, and we will be talking about first and second modernity, the theory of reflexive modernity, and critical views on this. All right, before we get into Ulrich Beck's work, we need to emphasize how important critique of modernity is. There is so many people followed Ulrich Beck's steps, and they worked in various areas that talks about the transformations in modern world and its analysis. Some of those people, you can see their pictures here. You can see Bruno Latour here, and Bauman, Luhmann, and then Anthony Giddens. To start with Anthony Giddens, Giddens, I just keep saying his last name wrong. He has a structuration theory. Giddens's work on structuration theory emphasized the interplay between individual agency and social structures, highlighting how modernity influences and influenced by human actions. And he also writes about the reflexive modernization. Giddens collaborated with Beck and Scott Lash on the book Reflexive Modernization, which explores how modern societies must continuously adapt and respond to new risks. Some of his books, one of his books published in 1990, The Consequences of Modernity and Modernity and Self-Identity, he talks about more like how our identity is shaped by new modernity. Zygmunt Bauman, this gentleman here, he is also, one of the known figures that contributed to the critic of modernity. He talks, one of his actually concepts called liquid modernity. Bauman introduces the concept of liquid modernity to describe the fluid and unstable nature of contemporary life, characterized by constant change and uncertainty. So you can just kind of feel the connections between Giddens' work that he's talking about, uncertainty, and Bauman is talking about uncertainty. Similar to Beck, Bauman examined the effects of individualization. Individualization is a big part of Beck's work, which is not really paid attention. His work, another parts of his work is more analyzed and reflected on, but this individualization, in my opinion, was the part ignored a lot. So Bauman examines the effects of individualization on social life, particularly how modernity dissolves traditional bonds and creates new forms of insecurity. So his book Liquid Modernity was published in 2000, and there's another very important book, I think it's called Liquid Fear, and that is published 2016. I really recommend you guys take a look if you want to kind of explore the idea of fear and anxiety in our modern world. There are many people, like, for example, Manuel Castells contribute to the critique of modernity. And this gentleman over here is Bruno Latour. Actually, he is Luhmann. He's a theory called systems theory. Luhmann's systems theory focuses on how social systems, including political, legal, and the economic systems, operate and manage complexity and risk in our modern societies. Another concept he has is a risk communication. He explores how societies communicate and deal with risk, highlighting the role of media and public discourse in shaping perceptions of danger. So these people contributed to the analysis of critique of modernity, and Beck, the Ulrich Beck, the author and scholar we discussed today, started this conversation and went very deep with his analysis of modern societies. So who's Ulrich Beck? Ulrich Beck was born in 1944 in Germany and lived until 2015. Actually, recently in 2015, he died. His book we are studying today or discussing today, called Risk Society Towards a New Modernity, that was first time published in 1986, which is coincided with nuclear Chernobyl nuclear power plant explosion. And it was right after that explosion, it just kind of sounded, it was talking about the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. It became the analysis of that explosion. And however, though, the Ulrich Beck's book was written way before that, and it was in the process of being published when this dangerous explosion happened. In Ulrich Beck's book, we can see he talks about reflexive modernization. We will talk what is that, cosmopolitanism, individualization, and he talks about globalization, environment, and risk debate in modern society. So in this book, we are focusing on two things. What do you understand when we say risk society? Just maybe pause the video here, maybe write your thoughts down about how or what you understand when we say risk society. That would be part of your exam for this week. And what is reflexivity? Before we understand it, maybe reflect on these terms. What is risk society in your mind? What you think about risk society when you hear this term? And also, what is reflexivity? How this risk society and reflexivity is interconnected. So if you did that, let's talk about what is risk society. First, I will just give you a quick definition or a quick explanation. Definition, I don't like definitions too much. I like to draw on the whiteboard or blackboard and explore everything in detail, and that is way better for me than definitions. But there are some good, helpful definitions as well. So risk society, the term risk society is a concept developed by Ulrich Beck. It refers to the society that is increasingly preoccupied with the future in safety. So now think about our society. Are we preoccupied with concerning about our future and safety, which generates a continuous series of risks? So we're worrying about the future and the risks and safety issues, and that is kind of generating continuous series of risks. In a risk society, individuals and institutions become more aware of the potential risks associated with modernity, including technological advancements. Today we talk about, the iPhone or smartphone zombies, right? Technological advancements, environmental hazards. So we talk about global warming and this all kinds of environmental hazards. The other global threats. What are other global threats? It can be about pollution in the oceans or oil spill, changing environment, and all this plastic stuff everywhere. It can be all different kinds of threats. This awareness, that being aware of all of these risks, shapes social structures and individual behaviors as people and governments try to manage and mitigate these risks. So when we go through this explanation, we kind of start to link these terms or words with the world we know, and it kind of just connects everything together. So what's reflexivity then? Reflexivity in sociology refers to the capacity of individuals and societies to reflect upon, examine, and alter their own practices, beliefs, and structures. So now risk society is the risks outside of ourselves. There is all kind of environmental risks, hazards, and all of those stuff. the reflexivity is in us, like we are reflecting or we are responding to the risks produced by our modern world. So it's in your mind, in your blood, in your cells. It involves a process of self-awareness and critical examination where social actors like you and I continuously monitor and adjust their actions in response to new information and changing circumstances. We often talk about this recycling thing, for example, or people are increasingly doing something to prevent this risks or safety concerns, right? Those are the product of reflexivity. People are reflecting on these risks, and those everything we do are the product of it. Reflexivity is crucial in risk society as it enables individuals and institutions to respond to risks in a more informed and adapted manner. So when we say about risk society, this is the risks, concerns, and safety issues produced by our modern society. And the reflexive modernity is about the groups and individuals who are responding to that. They are not free from it. They are not peaceful because they have these risks in their lives. So they are responding to that. They have reflexivity fixed in their thinking or psyche, whatever you call it. So this is reflexive society, the risk society, and reflexivity towards modern society. Proliferation of risks and unintended consequences. This is one of the concepts Ulrich Beck explores in the beginning of his book. In the risk society, risks are pervasive and affect various aspects of life, including health, environment, technology, and economy. So he says, the risks are not one-sided. They are multi-dimensional. They are very complex. They are not only, for example, pollution. They are not only, let's say, the risks introduced by oil spills, or not that. In modernity, risks are very widespread in every aspect of human life. In the individualization part, we will discuss how families are affected, or how children or adults or other people are affected by modern risks. Environmental, you can see from the pollutions and the things happening in our society. Also technology, think about the production of all different kinds of smartphones and AIs and everything. And today people are continually talking about what this system is doing to people. They stopped thinking, they use AI, they stopped doing stuff like everything is on your fingertips. You're doing, if everything is taken away from you all of a sudden, you might not be able to survive. Our survival techniques or ways we can survive is being eliminated by the modern society. So this is the kind of things he talks in the proliferation of risks in our times. And he talks about the boomerang effect. What is boomerang effect? These risks are often global in nature and transcend national boundaries. So many risks we know in our lives, they are kind of like we're surrounded by them. For example, if there are wildfires in, let's say, in Okanagan, or where I live in Kelowna. So it's just kind of like a regional thing. We can think like it's ours, this is our problem. But the smoke from that goes everywhere. Like it can get to US and it can get to Canada's different, although Canada is such a huge country, Alberta and other provinces also get this smoke from us. There is no border that holds them back in this area. Just like this, whatever happens with our society, it just becomes global. Some of the examples can be spread of COVID-19, like no boundaries could stop them. National boundaries does not mean nothing for this kind of risks. Global warming, for example, one of the things, when it happens to the whole world. Pollutions that, all kinds of pollutions travels from one side of the world to another sides of the world. Or there are technological risks produced if we produce it in Europe or Western countries or in Asia, it's spread everywhere and everybody gets the same thing. Economical dangers, they are also global because we are living in the globalized world. Before, maybe there was wealth inequality between people. There is a class differences. Our focus was towards that wealth inequality. Now, if these dangers were local, maybe people with money could move away from that and live somewhere with better air or in the forest area or somewhere better, right? But if the whole world is affected by these risks, or whole air is polluted, or the land is polluted, or the fruits we produce has chemicals that is not good for our health, nobody can run away from it. Maybe people can build this environmentally friendly, some kind of spaces or houses that covers themselves and maybe they have certain kind of filters, doesn't let all this kind of stuff to get in. Maybe they can have their own fruits and vegetables inside this, somehow covered in, that environmental homes. But that requires like huge amounts of money, and who can do that is not many people. So that means that our risks are global. So boomerang effect means that our risks in our modern time is global. It's not local. It's just one person, if one person gets it, other person also will get. But we should not forget still there is unequal distribution of risks in different societies. People who can live, like, for example, away from certain manufacturing companies, they probably get less risks than the more risks than those who can live in better areas. We are not saying that everybody is affected by these risks equally. There are certain kinds of stuff happening, certain parts of the world. Rich people can, pick and choose the places that can be better for them. Some other people cannot do that. So risks are still unequal, but still you cannot run away from the global risks. So reflexive modernization, now we just discussed a little bit, it is a critical self-aware engagement with the consequences of modernity. In the risk society, groups and individuals and societies are compelled to reflect on and confront the risk inherent in their own actions, challenging prevailing notions of progress and development. Now, in today's world, we hear more than enough about, we just, as we said, about the recycling and how that's important, and pollution and environment. There is like a non-stop conversation about them. People try to, help the environment. They are, more and more calling people to give give up their certain levels of comfort for the preservation of environment and future of next generations. This conversation is like, it became everyday thing. That is part of reflexive modernization. Ulrich Beck also talks about different periods in societies. He starts to talk with the traditional societies. He says in the traditional societies, people were connected with their families, with their communities, with their work. There was like a preservation of environment, and that was natural. And he talks about how structures shaped around the relationship of we, like we were, it was about extended families and church families and village or urban families. People lived in, together, tighter. They helped one another more. One person's issue was other person's issue, or there was, community kind of feeling that everybody mattered. And there is, of course, there are many things good and bad about these traditional societies. There are norms are very strict. If somebody deviates from those norms, they are, they are sanctioned or punished, and then brought back to this forms, the norms. And this norm is not always is good, right? There are harmful norms in society. People embedded and formed communally within concrete local um, time material relationships. That means that they were just really close or tight together. In the early modern societies, in first half of the modern life, started with industrialization, right? That we start to change, that there was, in industrial societies, people were moving more, and the society is becoming globalized, and it was easier for nuclear societies to move, and extended families start to break down, and they are kind of formed smaller nuclear families. Individuals start to change, that we talked about, started to become I. Social classes changed, and there were vertically and horizontally integrated societies. So we were shaping different kinds of relationships in the first modernity. People were connected through their work. For example, there were colleagues, there were, for example, working in certain manufacturing company, or there were engineers, or there were skilled people who made connections with similar people, similarly skilled people in their areas. That was the new collective structures shaping at that time. There was bureaucratization in our society, rationalization, enlightenment happened. Everything was changing in early societies. And the later reflexive modernity, the societies changed again, according to Ulrich Beck. He says, in the first modern traditional societies, the meanings were shared. In the second simple early modernity, that interests, needs, and wants were shared with group or people, smaller groups, let's say. In the third, or the reflexive modernity, the self was organized and it was about individual. And that's what we are talking about, our society. Self as an agent reflects on itself primarily, autonomous self-monitoring of life. Structural reflexivity means agent reflects on social structures, that what are the rules and what are the resources. Networks of flexibility, people are connected and disconnected quicker. Our networks became like through Facebook and through Twitter and through our work. The traditional family structures like dissolved in our time a lot. Communications are mediated by technology, and that is another new structure in our time. We talk through phones and texts, and this is an I period, like FaceTime and Facebook and everything about face and, that selfie or self, right? And our societies became like information based or knowledge based time. Everything is becoming like client centered or production centered. It's about effectiveness, what makes the work beneficial, or how can we make more money, more profit. In our times, our focus changed from traditional societies and from the early modern societies. And Ulrich Beck talks about the risks of the first modernity. What was risks of the first modernity? Think about that industrialization period, that people were moving from the countryside to the cities to get job in the manufacturing companies. The risks were about migration. It was about heavy industrial work, right? And the solutions of that time, according to Ulrich Beck, is the problems in our time. The risks at the time were primarily associated with industrialization, urbanization, technological advancements, including environmental pollutions, workplace hazards. It was hard work. It wasn't always safe. It was about social inequalities that, the Karl Marx, for example, talked about class inequality in society, right? It was all of them resulting from rapid industrial development. We can also argue like gender inequalities started to increase at that time because families were living in the big lands and producing some vegetables or crops with their families, and there was some way of like more men and women working together, producing stuff together. But industrial revolution changed this lifestyle. Now men were moving to the cities to work in the manufacturing companies in most cases, and women were left behind. All these kinds of changes happened at the time. Prostitution rised, and there was like kind of like a witchcraft, like women who were selling their body because they left without jobs. They were like became witches, and then they were punished because of that. The risks of first modernity were often more localized and immediate, affecting specific communities or industries. So if there are risks, so that was a local risks. Something happens and that's right away people affected by it, and then people together try to take care of that. But in the second modernity, things have changed. Now, Ulrich Beck discusses that says to to get good crop, for example, we used all this pesticides and all this kind of chemicals to our, earth. And then we got a good produce at that time. But after doing that so many times, like 5, 10 times, our land starts to become hazardous, or it became there was too much chemicals that is not good for our body. Now our produce, that vegetables or other stuff, becoming rich in this very harmful chemicals that can affect our health in the second modernity. And we created many manufacturing companies. Now all this unfiltered smoke or hazard spread around the world. Now this affected the quality of our air, our land, our water, our lives. Everything is becoming harmful for human health. And we created all these different kinds of technologies, and technologies produced more harm. For example, we can talk about the weapons or nuclear bombs that is producing so much fear and anxiety in our time that our lives becoming uncertain. The globalization of risks and uncertainties, the part of risks in the second modernity. Risks are systemic, that is not one risk. They are caused by long-term stuff we have done, and now they are systemic, interconnected, and often transcend national boundaries. And as we discussed earlier, anything happening one part of the world, any bad thing, for example, global warming, can affect the other part of the world, or air pollution, or the thinning of the ozone, ozone layer in the space. So those are the risks we have. Like if we have a hole there, all these different kinds of hazardous lights from the sun can come and burn the lives in, all kinds of lives on Earth. These challenges are systemic, interconnected, and often transcend national boundaries. They also challenge existing governance structures and traditional methods of risk management. If there were risks in local governments, for example, the local governments will try to address that, right? Or they will get some help. But if the challenges are global, then that means this world, not specific countries, has to work together to reduce this pollution or the risks. For example, there's so many times that world leaders trying to get together and solve or starts to do something about these global risks, that preservation of environment and, cleaning the, oceans from oil spills, or let's say talking about this pollution, plastic pollution in the oceans, right? All this kind of different things they are trying to do, but the economies of different countries are different. There is complex issues with that. There can be an argument about all this stuff happen. Maybe developed countries, they are developed and they start to produce this harm way earlier than developing countries, and then they should take the bigger responsibility than other countries. That is one argument. But today, developing countries producing more harm in some points. For example, China, India, those countries are becoming increasingly polluted. The air quality is not that great, and there is you can check statistics about which countries are higher in the air pollution or air quality is worse in certain countries. And those are, just rising to the sky and, kind of wind is taking everywhere. So we are not immune from those kind of pollutions. So both, we talked about the risks of the first modernity, and then we talked about the risks of the second modernity. And there are common risks as well. For example, social inequalities existed in both times, and we talk about them. I mean, social inequalities was the main concern in the first modernity, and now the inequalities are more towards that, not wealth, but the distribution of risks. That is Ulrich Beck's argument. Political instability, that even in first modernity and second modernity, this risk is kind of shared. Conflicts, there was always conflicts in the first modernity, and there was always conflicts in the second modernity. Human rights violations, they are very, very popular in the first modernity, and they're very popular in some different ways in the second modernity. Those are the kind of risks shared between these two modernities. We should not think that, one modernity has more risk than another one. There was different kind of risks. In first modernity, risks were more and different. It was about the not understanding of what's going on with natural disasters, all different kinds of things, and people's work was harder, traveling was harder. We can think about traveling. For example, people to travel from one side of the world to the another side of the world, they spend weeks, maybe even months to get there, and they had more safety concerns, they had more risks, and it wasn't easy. It was difficult thing to do. And in our time, that is not a problem. We can sit in Vancouver, in the Vancouver airport in the afternoon, and you can find yourself in the other side of the world in the morning with, all this comfortable seats and drinks and food is offered. All this stuff is for you to enjoy your flight, for example. So risks at the time is different than the risks in our time. And one of the concepts Ulrich Beck talks is individualization. Now we're getting into his another concept that is very, very important. Ulrich Beck, when he published his book, Risk Society, the full attention went towards nuclear disaster. It was kind of like this book was about nuclear disaster. And that's why like individualization part was hugely ignored. But I think individualization part is very important part of this book. In our modern societies, Ulrich Beck argues, the risks shift from collective risks to individual risks. What does it mean? In a risk society, the responsibility for managing risks shifts from collective entities like the state or community to individuals. Now we can understand why people are trying to recycle and do certain things. Maybe they are trying to grow their own organic food, or because of this reflexivity, right? People are increasingly expected to navigate and mitigate risks on their own. And these risks are not only about environmental risks or technological risks, or this is about what is going on in our structures. For example, if we have children in our families, we kind of try to restrict their time on iPads or iPhones or computers, because we understand that technology also produces risk, all different kinds of risks. We try to navigate and mitigate that risks. And another risk can be how we are raising our families, what our family morals are. Um, Ulrich Beck talks about um, Ulrich Beck talks about in the traditional societies, for example, people came to have dinner at home. It was natural, it was expected, and it was only ways to, in most of the time, ways to receive their food. And that was so natural. When people finished their work or when they were hungry, they came home and they had dinner with their families. In our time, because of the change in the nature of employment or labor, everybody works in different times. For example, this introduction of electricity allowed people to work around the clock, like they can work 24 hours because it's bright and they can work. Or there are shift works. Some people work from morning to 4, some people start late and work until 9, some people start at the evening and works until morning. So people need to put effort to bring their families together. For example, they will talk about having Sunday dinners, for example, or trying to bring everybody together, and it's not easy. That is one of the risks of our time. We don't think about those risks a lot, but our structures, modern structures, make people individual, or people are just grabbing their fast food or whatever on their way to work. So they don't bother sitting and eating with their families. Now they can live alone. They don't have to be bothered by their families. The structure of family or importance of family decreased. So those are the stuff Ulrich Beck covers in the part of individualization. So risks are not only about environment or technology, it is about the structures, how it is making people individualized beings. They are not big societies like in a traditional societies. They are not tight communities or groups like in the first modernity. Now they are more and more becoming individualized. And he talks about increased autonomy and responsibility. As just I mentioned about people can live on their own because if they can't cook, they can go and grab their food from the fast food restaurant. Or there are pre-made salads and all kinds of food in the grocery stores. If they don't know how to do certain stuff, all kinds of services are available for them. Individuals gain more autonomy over their life choices, but this comes with the greater personal responsibilities. They have to make sure they know how to do stuff for them, or they need to get enough money to pay for those things. The decisions about health, career, safety, and lifestyle becomes personal rather than societal concerns. For example, people can have diets if they feel overweight, they can take that on their hands and diet, or they can make choices running, walking, doing all these kinds of exercises to become healthier. That's personal choice. They have choices about careers. In our world, it's not easy to get job where you live. So there are a migration of labor around the world, getting job, moving certain places. Sometimes it's hard for families. More and more people are becoming like, kind of surrounded with the idea of career, and then sometimes they're ignoring the idea of family. Maybe they can't afford to do both of them. They have to choose either career or family, safety concerns, or lifestyle. those are the ones, according to Ulrich Beck, is becoming more individual responsibility. So, there was a slide about fragmentation of traditional structures, but we're talking all along about this, that traditional social structures such as family, class, community becomes less influential. Today, after 18, kids, or even before that, children tend to move away for their schooling or work or just to become independent. That wasn't the case in traditional societies. Yes, people traveled sometime to study in bigger cities or do certain things around the world. They did, but it was very minimal. In our time, it's almost like majority of the people, they choose to do this kind of things, and they are not tied with the family relations or what family thinks about that. It's becoming less concern in our time. Individuals must create their own paths without relying heavily on established norms or support systems. And this is another thing. Before, people followed the traditional way of growing up and becoming, for example, if they were born in the family of shoemakers, they will become a shoemaker. They were next generation of shoemakers. And then they have this really organized way of living their lives and how they get married, how they have their children, how they travel or not travel, how they have their food. Everything was kind of like a created for them, and then they followed that paths. In today's world, there is rarely you can see that children are following the parents' ways and becoming, like, if their children, the parents are doctors, they may become a doctor because they're influenced with that work, or maybe not. So it's becoming more and more individual choice. And lifelong learning and adaptability is part of it. We um it's not like in our traditional societies, they were like, you need to become literate at certain time, and you learn at certain time, it start to work certain times. Now it's becoming continuous self improvement, and learning are emphasized as necessary to adapt to changing risks. So we learn every day. We introduce new things to ourselves every day. We try to adapt to what's going on in our societies because the changes are more rapid. And if we stay in one place and try to live our lives without learning and adapting to new things, then we are just kind of feeling behind. For example, older generations in our time, they are not maybe sometimes they're not adapted well to this new smartphones and stuff. And they are kind of like, I don't know how to do that. And they ask from young people. Even the 6-year-old or 10-year-old can, know better than grandmas and grandpas at, about certain things, right? So this is kind of changes in our time, and they're rapid. They require learning and adaptability all the time. Also, flexibility and adaptability becomes crucial traits for navigating uncertain environments. So if we are uncertain about that, that means like we are not fixed to live our lives like that. That uncertainty keeps us kind of fluid, and we just keep learning and adapting and trying to make sure, trying to know what that uncertain thing is and how our lives be in the future. Like that uncertainty keeps us going. In reflexive modernization, individuals engage in reflexive practices, constantly reassessing their actions and choices in response to the new risks and information. So now in our society, we have all these information technologies, and everybody discussing about the different kinds of risks in our time. Now people are aware of that. For example, that, issue with being overweight became one of those things that everybody is aware of. They are talking about how sugar is bad and how eating certain kind of product is bad. Pre-med certain things are being rich in stuff that makes people overweight. And now people are looking for that information, becoming aware of that information, and responding to that by avoiding eating certain things or doing something to, kind of in response to that. Those are the reflexive modernization, the elements of reflexive modernization. And that's one thing. For example, if there is the concern about the air quality, people are doing some sorts of, filters in their homes, for example. If there is a concern about the water quality, they are producing certain kind of filters that filters out our water, and we can have softer, better water in our home. Or we can buy certain kind of bottled waters for our homes. So those are the elements of reflexive modernization. Personal and social practices are subject to ongoing scrutiny and modification. So everything we do is discussed today. And if we are doing something wrong, the awareness is raised. We are living in the society, we are aware of everything, right? For example, as we mentioned in the individualization, the parents are cautious of their children becoming very independent and cutting themselves off from their families. Now there is an increased awareness towards that, and families think about what to do to keep their children under their understanding of what the family tradition is or norms are, or they try to keep them in that framework of what they understood about lives and everything. And that's why there is a generational gap between understanding this society and that society. So that is parts of our reflexive modernity. There are also psychological impacts. The burden of individualization can lead to increased stress and anxiety as people feel solely accountable for managing risks. In our world, depression is increased so much. People have all this kind of this anxieties, fears from these risks, and they get into depression because that is overwhelming. There is, for example, few examples. There are anxieties about job security. If you don't have a job, you don't know where your next food is coming from, or can you afford your apartment next month, or can you pay your mortgage next month? Will you have your job in 6 months or 1 year? So finding that secure jobs are becoming rare. So that is part of increased anxiety and stress in our lives. That psychologically impacts individuals, families, groups, and society. So also there is people, how stresses and anxieties because they feel that their families are kind of, dissolved. The connection between family members, children or parents are dissolved or not that good. And that can cause a lot of stress in people's lives. Stress can be from many, many different things. It can be because of the too much internet, and it can be because of many, many different things in our lives. And that's the cause of all this psychological the psychological effects or psychological disruptions in our lives. Mental health issues may arise from the pressure to constantly adapt and perform. That is another thing. We are constantly uncertain. We are constantly learning and changing. There is a pressure from society, pressure from our time to learn about the stuff and adapt. We are living in the very fast-paced world. Just catching up with everything becomes a stress. And that mental health issues can, arise from those as well. Inequality and access. In our world, we talk about, 1% people having 99% of the wealth in this world. So that is just the increased inequality because of capitalist system, for example. Not all individuals have equal resources or opportunities to manage these risks effectively. Individualization can exacerbate social inequalities as those with fewer resources face greater challenges. Earlier, we talked about boomerang effect, that rich and poor affected in the same way, right? So if you are living in, let's say, Vancouver or Kelowna, so anything, the risks based on environment, pollutions, air quality affects everybody equally, rich or poor. That is one thing. And rich might have more things to do. They can spend on, as we said, better homes and better filters and air conditioners and all of those different kinds of things, which other people may not afford it. Now, that is one kind of inequality. But the main inequality we're talking here is based on where you are, you can also have different kinds of risks in your life. If you're close to oceans, for example, you're affected by the oil spills, and then that is different than people who are living in the better areas affected. So the individualization can exacerbate social inequalities, and then people face it differently. Consumer society, that is also another very big risks in our times. There was one picture I used for my PowerPoint slides. It was called Define the Need, and it just shows a poor children trying to, they're asking for food or drink. And there is the part of the picture is Christmas shopping. So one of them in need of basic stuff, food and clothes and shelter or safety. The other one is about buying all this tons of expensive stuff for Christmas because that's the need of the family, right? So in our society, consumerism reached to the point that, we are bombarded with advertising, all different kinds of ideals of life. They kind of like, navigate our lives. So if we get, let's say, our first home, it tells us about, what's the next thing to get. And maybe it's like a, car, or maybe it's a flat screen TV or something. Our needs are increasing and increasing and increasing. The people are becoming more affected by this consumerism. And the Ulrich Beck, and another one, just I remembered another work with Marcuse, One-Dimensional Man, which we will be talking about. One-Dimensional Man, he talks about that the worker and their manager and the CEO of that company, they make different levels of money. One of them, let's say, gets 40,000 a year, another one gets like 100,000 a year, another one gets 1,000,000 a year, and all of them are not happy because the worker is trying to get the next thing they want, and then manager is trying to get next thing they want, and the CEO is trying to get next thing they want. The worker can dream of a new car, which can be $20,000. And then manager can think of a new car that can be $120,000. And then CEO can think of a new car that can be $1,000,000. That's just numbers I'm throwing on you. So they are always wanting something what they cannot afford. And therefore, all three people, worker and manager and the CEO, are not happy. So consumer society makes people unhappy, and it increases anxieties. It increases, the stress they have, that wanting to have the next thing can stress people. So the Beck also reflects on these ideas. He says, he talks about risk management often translates into consumer choices, with individuals purchasing products and services to mitigate perceived risks. That is another part of consumer society. Markets respond by offering various solutions to individual risk concerns. Now we're talking about, we have the risks, we're trying to mitigate these risks, and then there is thousands of different services, different kind of things offered to help them. For example, our computers get, virus, right? Sometimes. And there is like a virus is created by some people and sent to computers to, take them out of the market, for example, or make people to buy more computers and all of those stuff. And then there is new protection against these risks offered by so many different companies. So risk is created by some groups, and the solution is offered by other groups. So markets are responding to these risks by offering solutions to these individual risks and concerns. And it can be all different kinds of things. For example, if you're concerned about the family relations, there are self-help books, and there are all different kinds of solutions offered by other people. So this is our short discussion of Ulrich Beck's Risk Society Towards New Modernity. And I would want you to watch this documentary that called Before the Flood. That is directed by Fisher Stevens and starring Leonardo DiCaprio. Leonardo DiCaprio travels around the world and watches the stuff happening to the environment, and he becomes one of the advocates in the UN for environmental changes. So he explores the impacts of climate change. The film, oh, wrong way. The film, I'm not doing it. The film covers various aspects of environmental degradation, including discussions on carbon footprints, deforestation, renewable energy, and sustainable living. Please watch this, and there would be questions in your exam about this documentary. So this is our last part of our lecture. If you have any questions, please bring them to a discussion group or send me an email. I'll be very happy to help you with them. I hope you enjoyed the lecture. I will talk to you in our next lecture. Have a great day. Bye-bye.